Put off my video.
Hey everybody, as you're making your way in from the waiting room, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm gonna give a few seconds to let some late arrivers get in and get the screen and the slides up on. Let's see what we've got here. There we go, that's the right one. This session is being recorded tonight, so if you're listening to this anytime after October the 8th, you'll be listening to a recording, so some of the timelines that we'll talk about might get a little bit tighter. At the same time, if you want to share a link, we'll be sending out a link to the recording later on so that you can share that with anyone you know who might benefit from the information we talk about tonight. Everybody's coming in on mute. We'll keep you on mute during the presentation. That cuts down on background noise. And again, since we're recording, it helps us make a nice clean recording for those folks who do listen later so they can hear everything that we've got to share. If you've got any questions during the presentation tonight, please feel free to drop those in the chat. You can see the chat if you look at the gray box on your screen. It's either going to be the box that says chat, or if you don't see that there, you'll see 3 dots in the word more. You click there, it opens up a sub menu and you'll see chat there. If you open up that chat, you can share your thoughts, your questions, any comments you have as you go, feel free to drop those in there. If we stay with a pretty small crowd, which it looks like we've got so far, we can always open up the mics here and there at the end of the session to allow people to ask questions one at a time. And again, tonight our topic is voting. It's your right. We're really happy to have with us my colleague from Disability Rights New Jersey, our Director of Policy, Mary Saccone. Mary is one of the longest tenured attorneys at Disability Rights New Jersey, and she's our resident voting expert and head of our PAVA program. She's going to be taking the reins on the presentation tonight. Once I close off my mic, I'll let her take the lead. Any kind of technical questions, feel free to drop me in a line in the chat and I'll try to help resolve those. And without any further ado, Mary, go ahead and take it away.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you came. I'm going to talk briefly about your right under voting and all the changes that are being made for the upcoming election. It's a big topic right now and everybody's a little confused because of all the changes. So that's what I want to go over a little bit with you. Next slide. This presentation I created myself, Mary Saccone. I'm the Director of Policy, and I also had assistance with Christopher Miller, who's my assistant. Next slide. Disability Rights New Jersey, we are the Protection and Advocacy Agency for New Jersey, and we are there to preserve the human, civil, and legal rights of persons with disabilities, empowering equality through persistence, awareness, and expertise. Next slide. And as I'm sure you guys have seen, we have our COVID, DRNJ COVID website. So anything that is new or especially regarding voting will be on that website, be posted on that website. Next slide. Okay, so one of the big things I want to always reinforce with people are the reasons to vote. One, it's your right. Your vote does make a difference. People say, oh, it never does. You know, my one vote doesn't count. Well, there's been many elections where one vote has made the difference. There was a congressional district a legislative district in Virginia where they had to flip a coin to decide who won. So, I mean, there are times where your vote does make a difference. And it's important that you vote so that your voice can be heard. It's important to be involved in the political process. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about voting and how you do that. Next slide. This upcoming election, there's a lot of things on the ballot. As everybody's aware, there's the presidential election. I don't think anybody knows that. Everybody knows that. There's also Cory Booker's Senate seats up. All the House of Representatives seats in New Jersey are up. There are state ballot issues. One is regarding redistricting with respect to the upcoming census and the legalizing marijuana. And I believe there's another ballot issue. I can't remember what it was. And there's also local races. There might be school board elections, county clerk might be up. I mean, things like that, local races that you would, each individual municipality would be different on that. Next slide. So how do I vote? First, you have to be eligible to vote. And there's 4 questions to ask. Am I 18 years old? Am I a United States citizen? Am I currently in prison serving a sentence for a felony? And am I registered? Next slide. In order to vote, you must be registered 21 days before the election. So in New Jersey, that means you, in order to vote on this upcoming November 3rd, the deadline to register is Tuesday, October 13th. That is next Tuesday. So you've got, if you haven't registered yet, you have 5 days to register. So, and it's real simple. We'll talk about how you do that, but just be aware the deadline is fast approaching. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, thank you. I don't know if I'm registered. How do I find out? It's very easy. You go to www.njelections.org and you will click on the 2020 voter information portal. And once you get there, there's a tab that asks you, am I registered? We can go, I can show you this.
All right, I'm going to drive the web browser now. And we're going to switch our screen share. Bear with me just a second. There we go. So I'm taking a look at the website, Mary, and if I wanted to find out if I'm registered to vote, how would I do it?
There's a, see that blue line? There's the NJ New Jersey Information Portal.
Okay, I click on that.
And then you'll go down. And this has all the information you need to know about whether you're registered, how to vote, it'll help you register to vote, track your ballot, secure drop boxes, polling locations, and any questions or military voting. So if you want to find out if you're registered, click on Am I Registered?
That's easy. Here we go.
And then you type in your first name, your last name, and your date of birth.
Everyone's going to make fun of me again for how young I am. That's okay. Oh, look, there I am. I'm registered to vote.
You're registered to vote. And the great thing about this is it tells you, are you active? Because that's important when I talk about vote by mail ballots. But it also gives you your voter ID. That number is important because if you want to track your ballot, you can use that information to create track your ballot, basically to sign up for track your ballot, which is also important if you're going to be voting by mail, because then you can find out whether they received the ballot, if your ballot was counted. So it's a really good thing to do. So if you want to know what your voter ID number is, that's how you can find it.
Okay, and that's right down here underneath the county and the city that you're registered to vote. Easy to find, easy to use. All right.
It's very easy to use. And if you're not registered to vote, if you don't come up, then you can easily go to register to vote and click on that, and you can vote online, or you can register online, which is really easy. It's also really easy to do. You either have to, you can do it by a driver's license or a non-driver identification card, or you can do, if you don't have one of those, you can do it by your social security number. If you do it by the social security number, then you need a tablet or something where you can sign your name on. So if you have a tablet or a phone even, you can just go on and sign your name by and register to vote that way. Very easy. I was talking with the director of the Division of Elections today. They've had about 300,000 registrations since they set this up in early September. So a lot of people are using it. And I honestly think it's really easy to do.
That's great. It looks very easy. All right, you want me to switch back to the slideshow now?
Go back to the slideshow.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so next slide. as I said, you can become registered. You can fill out the online voter registration form. If you didn't want to do online, if you want to do it by paper, you can print out a registration application from that website as well. So also there's automatic voter registration if you go to Motor Vehicle Commission. If you do anything there, if you sign up for a driver's license or something, you can be automatically registered as well. Just make sure you need to supply some proof of identification and your address. That's all you need to do. But as I say, the online is the easiest way, and it's the quickest way. I mean, it's easiest and quickest to go ahead and do it. So I'm encouraging people to use the online voter registration. But whatever you do, if you want to vote in November 3rd, you need to do it by Tuesday. You can register at any time, but if you register after Tuesday, you will not be eligible to vote on November 3rd. Next slide. One of the biggest questions I get is, can a person vote if they have a guardian? Yes, in New Jersey, yes, you can vote if you have a guardian. The only, so long as the person has the capacity to vote and the guardianship did not specifically revoke the person's ability to vote. So capacity is a very low standard, meaning can the person make a choice? And people with guardians make choices all the time. They choose what to eat, they choose what clothes to wear. So as long as they can express a choice, that's generally what is meant by having capacity. But I say, as long as the guardianship does not, you have to have a judge specifically take away a person's right to vote in the guardianship proceeding, which most often does not happen. The other thing is you still must meet all the other requirements. You must be 18 years of old, a US citizen, and you must be registered to vote and not serving a sentence for felony. Next slide. Now, because of COVID-19, there have been a lot of changes to the voting process in New Jersey. It is now primarily vote by mail. All active registered voters will automatically get a vote by mail ballot, and they should have been sent out by October 5th. So if you should be receiving your ballot. If you are a registered voter and you've already registered, you should have received your ballot either probably by tomorrow at the latest. If you don't receive your ballot by then, you should be calling the county clerk to find out where your ballot is. If you can also vote in person, but only in-person voting will be primarily provisional ballots, unless you are using unless you have a disability that prevents you from using a paper ballot. So if you have a disability that you cannot, you either have a dexterity impairment, a visual impairment, or something that prevents you from being able to fill out a paper ballot, then you can request to be able to vote on the machine using an accessible voting machine. The one thing is, just keep in mind, I'm really encouraging people to use the vote by mail system because there are going to be fewer polling places, and there are going to be requirements in terms of wearing masks and social distancing and all of that. So there could be longer lines if people choose to go in person. So vote by mail is easier. The ballot's coming to you. You can easily fill it out and submit it. And I'll talk about that. Next slide. One of the things is when I say active voters, most people are active voters. However, there are some people who, what do they mean by inactive voters? If you are an inactive voter, if you did that registration, you checked out your registration and at the bottom it said inactive, that means that they have some reason to believe that you either don't live where you say you lived, or they have some reason, like maybe they sent a sample ballot in the past and it came back to them, it didn't. And so what you're going to need to do is update your registration in order to get to be able to vote. So that's just something that you can check on. But if you are an active registered voter, you would have received a vote by mail ballot. Next slide. I've already said that. Skip next slide. Okay. Now it is a two-step. Normally, in most elections, it's a two-step process. In this particular election, it's not because of this COVID-19. But you generally have to request an application, fill out the application, and then get your vote by mail ballot. There are going to be, for some people, if you're registering to vote, it will ask you to send you a vote by mail ballot. So you just click on that. If you are not, there are some times where you may still need to complete the application. If you are not going to be where you're registered. Most common example is you are a student who's away at college. then you would still need to do an application. So you can put in your address of where you actually want your ballot to be sent. Sometimes right now with COVID, a lot of people are not staying where they live. You know, they went off to a vacation home that they're staying at for the whole time because they don't need to vote, or they don't need to be around for work. They can do the work remotely. So people have gone stay with their parents or their in-laws or whatever. They've gone. So those people still need to actually submit an application so they can tell the board of or the county clerk where they are located. Next slide. The vote by mail application has to be mailed up to 7 days before the election. If you can't do that, then you can return it in person to the office of the clerk up to 3 p.m. the day before the election. Next slide. This is what an application for a vote by mail ballot is. If you look in the box number 4, that's where you would fill out if you are not at your regular location. So that would be where you need to fill out. If you need someone to assist you, there's an assister section, and you need to fill, the assister needs to fill that out if they're helping you fill out the application. So there's a place for assisting at any step in the process. Next slide. So you've got your vote by mail ballot. The most important thing about filling out the ballot is you need to fill out the directions, follow the directions exactly. Because if you don't, your vote may not be counted. And this is one of the big concerns about vote by mail. So this is the thing I stress more than anything else, is that you get the ballot, there will be instructions in the ballot, on the ballot, inside, well, with the ballot that you receive. I just received mine yesterday. There was like 2 big things of instructions. So you just have to make sure you follow the instructions very carefully. So you get the ballot, make a mark on wherever you want to do it. But if you say you make 2 marks, say you incorrectly marked the ballot, well, what I would request, don't try to fix it, because then it won't count. Because then they'll say it's an overvote or something like that. If you have stray marks, that's a big problem. Call the county clerk, request a new ballot. They will send you one. I had that happen to me. My husband accidentally ripped up my ballot, my primary ballot. So I had to call the county clerk, and they were very nice. They just sent me another ballot. So if there's something that happens that you mess up the ballot or something, just call and request a new ballot. Fill it out very carefully. Make sure you do both sides, because I know I just got mine today. There's the questions are on the back. The people to vote for are on the front, but there's questions on the back. So you have to make sure you follow that out. There's a certification you need to fill out. You fill out the certification, make sure you fill it out completely. That's where you sign, but don't rip it off. It's perforated. You're not supposed to rip it off. It's like, do not tear it off, leave it attached. So make sure you leave that attached. When you fill out and you get the ballot, make sure you include, there's going to be 2 envelopes. You put the ballot in the inner envelope and you seal the inner envelope. There's a lot of talk about naked ballots. Well, New Jersey also has naked ballots. You have to have the inner, you have to put it in the inner envelope. Many times people forget to put the ballot in the envelope. So they send the envelopes back and they don't forget. So make sure you remember to put your ballot in the inner envelope, seal the inner envelope. That's got the certification, fill out the certification, take that inner envelope, stick it in the outer envelope. Make sure the address labels are, if the address is showing through. Those are really, really important, and seal that. And then you can put it, so there's certain steps. It's not hard, but when you're doing it the first time, there's lots of rooms for mistakes. So just be very careful. If you need assistance, once again, there's an assister section on the certification. That person just needs to sign their name, fill out that assister section, but you can have anybody assist you that you want. Next slide. Oop. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. If you did not get a vote by mail ballot, or you requested it, it didn't come, whatever, you can still go to the polls on election day, but once again, you'll vote provisionally, unless of course you have a disability and you need to be able to vote on the accessible machine. The key is to remember you can only vote once. So if you filled out your vote by mail ballot and you sent it in, you do not go to the polls on election day. If you did not mail it in, you just forgot it, you filled it out, you left it at home, you didn't do it, then you can still go to the polls on election day. Next slide. As I say, you can request assistance at any point. You can have someone assist you while you're doing the vote by mail ballot. If you go to the polls, you can bring somebody with you to assist you. You can ask for assistance and they will give you 2 people from different parties to assist you. Next slide. If you have a visual impairment or a dexterity impairment and you cannot use the paper vote by mail ballot, you can request from the county clerk an accessible electronic ballot. It's not very well known. This is a fairly new process. I'm trying to get the state to be more letting people know that this is out there. But a lot of people don't know about it. But yes, you can request, you just have to call the county clerk and say, I'm a person with a disability. I can't use the paper ballot. Can I have an electronic accessible ballot or accessible electronic ballot? If the county clerk says, and we don't offer that, call Disability Rights New Jersey. They are supposed to be providing that. Next slide. How does the accessible ballot work? You will receive an electronic ballot that can be filled out on your computer. Basically, you will go onto the web. There's a certain site. It's Voting Works is the provider. And basically, you'll be given a PIN code, and that will allow you to bring up your ballot online, and you can fill it out online. After you fill it out, though, you will have to print it out, and you will have to put it back in the envelopes that you received with your regular vote by mail ballot. So you still have the inner envelope and the outer envelope that you have to put the ballot in. And then you would have to put it in a Dropbox, mail it back, return it however anybody else would return it. So it's not fully accessible, and that's something I got to work on with the state, but at least you can still fill it out in secret. Next slide. So how do I return it? There's a lot of concern about the mail, but you can return the ballot by the mail. You can just put it in a mailbox. If you're going to do that, I recommend you do that as early as possible. So as soon as you get that ballot, fill it out and put it back in the mail as soon as possible. You don't have to put postage on it. There's no need for postage. You can just drop it in a mailbox. But I say you must have them postmarked by November 3rd and received by November 10th. But I encourage people to just get it in the mail as soon as possible. And that's why it's important to go to sign up for Track Your Vote, because then you can see when they actually received the ballot. So if you put it in the mail early and you can check to see, oh, they received it on such and such a date, then you know that they have it. You can also put it in a Dropbox. And that's what actually I'm planning on doing. There are going to be Dropboxes across all, they have to have at least 10 per county, and they're spread out among the county. I think Mercer County, where I live, is got about 15. I know my local municipality has one, which is probably where I'll drop mine off. That is supposed to be, it's monitored 24/7, under surveillance 24/7 to make sure that nothing funny happens. And you just it's like dropping it in a mailbox, except it's specifically for voting ballots, and it's under the guise of the elections officials. So there's no mail. I assume they clean it out, probably take it out every day. I know my in-laws did that. They put it in the ballot box, and then they were tracking their ballot, and they saw that it's been received like the day after, or that's 2 days after. So their ballots are already returned. You can also return your ballot in person to the County Board of Elections. They don't really want you to be doing that till like next week, I think. They're pretty busy, so they really aren't real thrilled about doing this one. But you can go in, but if you do bring it in person, you have to have identification to prove who you are when you're doing that. If you want to send someone else in your place, then you have to do what's called a messenger, and that has to either be a family member or somebody who resides in your county. So there's a lot of rules about delivering it in person, but it's still an option. On election day, you can also go to your polling location, but only you individually can bring the ballot to your polling location. And I think, once again, you have to bring identification to prove that you are the individual whose ballot it is. And as I say, you can sign up to track your ballot at www.njelections.org. And you go to that voter information portal, and it'll explain how to do that. Next slide. As I say, they will have in-person polling locations, and they're open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. But it's only provisional ballots unless you're using an accessible voting machine. Next slide. As I said, there's fewer polling places. There's one polling place in each municipality, and they have to have a minimum of 50% of polling places in each county. So if you've got a small county with a very few municipalities, they will just give you like half what you have. But I say, the thing is, just remember that because there's different polling locations, it may not be your normal polling location. So you need to go to www.njelections.org to check to see where your actual polling location is. Mine was normally at the municipal building. Now it's going to be at the senior center. As I say, I'm not going. I don't want to be anywhere near people. So I'm going to do mine vote by mail. But you just have to make sure you know where your polling location is because it may have changed. Next slide. If you do go in person, the polling location should be accessible, and it should have at least one accessible voting machine or an audio machine. If it's not accessible, please call our hotline, 866-493-0023, because that's something that we want to monitor to make sure that the municipalities and the counties are providing accessible polling places. Next slide. As I said earlier, you can have two people, you can have one person, you can bring one person with you into the polling place. If you don't have a person, then you can request assistance and they'll send two people from different parties. Next slide. So what can I do if I have problems on election day? Well, we have a election day hotline from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m., which our hotline number is 866-493-0023. You can also contact us, our main line during regular business hours at 800-922-7233 or 609-292-9742. It's basically if you call the hotline and the hotline's busy, you can get through to someone on our regular line as well, if it's during regular business hours. And just so you know, our hotline is actually open now during regular business hours. So if you have questions before the election or you have questions about the vote by mail ballot, our hotline is open now and we're taking calls for people who have questions. So feel free to call during regular business hours, Monday through Friday. Next slide. So what can you do? If you're not registered to vote, register today and vote to make a difference. So when I say register today, because the registration deadline is October 13th. So if you haven't registered or you're not sure if you're registered, go to the website, check to see if you're registered. If your name doesn't pop up, go ahead and register. It doesn't take a lot of time. Go ahead and do it so that you can vote on November 3rd. Next slide. The other thing you can do, and this is a big thing, is make a plan to vote. And this is important for everybody, but I think it's especially important for people with disabilities because you need to know, one, are you going to go ahead and vote by mail or go to the polls in person? If you vote by mail, your ballot's coming to you. It's already there. You can vote at any time you want. You can take as much time as you want. There's not other people around. You can have anybody help you, and it's very easy. The downside with vote by mail is you have to be very careful to make sure you follow the instructions properly so that so your vote gets counted. If you decide you want to go to the polling places, that's great. Just remember, if you get sick or something, you may not be able to go on election day. So that can always create a problem. To be prepared to have transportation. One of the biggest problems we have for people with disabilities is they don't think about transportation on election day. They can't get transportation to the polls. So make sure you have your transportation, and make sure you have everything planned out. Like, do I want to go early in the morning where there might be a lot more people there? Maybe I'll go like midday. There might not be as many people. Try to figure out what would be the best time for you to go and plan to be there for a while. So those are some of the things you need to think about. But whatever you do, just make a plan to vote, and because if you make a plan, you're more likely to do it. So that's my advice on that. Next slide. You can also encourage your friends to register and vote, and then make sure you vote. So those are the most important things. So next slide. And I said, if you have any questions about voting, contact our hotline, 866-493-0023, or you can also email us at voterhotline@drnj.org 24/7. So you just send if you're like, oh, I have a question, just send an email, you'll get a response. Next slide. We have our voting guide, which we collaborated with the Bog Center and the the Council on Developmental Disabilities, to create. The one, it's up on our website. The only thing is it's not as accurate for this election because there's been all these changes. However, we do, once again, we collaborated with the Bog Center, helped us create one, a 2-page document with all the changes for this particular election. So there is that as well, which should be also up on our website. Next slide.
All right, Mary, we've gotten to the questions section already. Here we are.
I was moving fast, so I wanted to make sure I covered everything, and we can go through the questions.
All right, yeah, so let's take a look. I've got a couple of questions that I've got in the chat box. And I think some of this is stuff you covered, but it's probably worth repeating because it's important stuff. If you wanted to find out whether your normal polling location is open, if you have to go in person to vote, where do you go to look to make sure that you know whether you can go to your regular polling location or if you have to go to an alternate polling location?
Well, what I would suggest you do is go to, I believe the website, www.njelections.org. If you want to go back there, can you go back to the website?
On my way. Here we go. This is the slide that answers that question.
Yeah. If you actually, why don't we go into the website because I can show you how to find your polling location.
Let's see if I can make it work.
Yes.
There we go.
Go to the information portal again.
All right, that's again right up here at the top on that blue bar. I go to the information portal and get all these choices.
Polling locations.
It's polling locations. There it is. And I can look up to see by county, I guess, right? Oh, here you go.
So that if you don't know what district you're in, then you can check with your local municipality about that or the county. But these are telling you what districts you're located in.
I see. And so these polling places would be the ones that are going to be open on election day.
Correct.
Fantastic. Okay. So there you go. Colleen put up in the chat box a link to the updated general election guide. That's the collaboration between the Bog Center, Council on Developmental Disabilities and Disability Rights New Jersey. So that's up on the chat if anyone wants to follow the link. It's also was included in the invitation to this event. I'll make sure that when we send out the recording that the document gets attached again, just in case anybody missed it the first time around.
That has all the information specifically, it's specific to this election, because this election has changes that we normally don't have. So do we have other questions?
I've got one other question, I think, in the chat box, and I'll remind anyone who's in the audience that if you want to ask a question, now is your chance. You can go ahead and type that in the chat box, and I'll take a look and make sure that Mary can answer it while we're all here. The other question I have in the chat box is from Jill, and Jill wants to know, I got a ballot in the mail from somebody else who used to live at my address. What do I do?
Well, one, don't try, don't use it to vote. Basically, there's a couple things you can do. You can try to contact the county clerk and say, hey, this person no longer lives here. Because the way they try to keep the rolls updated is when things get returned to them. So if a sample ballot gets sent out and it's returned to sender, then they know that that person doesn't live there anymore, or there's a problem. Mail does not get, ballots do not get forwarded, so it would be returned. Unfortunately, a lot of times, like in this case, it still gets delivered to you even though the person isn't there. So if you want to call the county and county clerk and say, hey, just to update your registration list, this person's ballot came to me, this person doesn't live here. And that way they can help, that can help clean up their ballot, their registration list. But don't use the ballot. Like I got my daughter is in college. She is not, she's registered in New Jersey because she registered here, but she is also registered in Ohio where her school is. So she's voting in Ohio. So I have her ballot, but I'm not going to do anything with it. Actually, what I'm doing with it is to help people understand how they look. I've got my two, I'm like, oh, this is a great way to show people is, use her ballot, but I'm not going to fill it out. She's not going to fill it out. It's just going to be here, but I'm not going to, she still wants to remain registered. So when she moves back to New Jersey, then she'll vote here, but she's voting in Ohio for right now. So that happens. But people generally do not vote twice. The other thing to remember is when you do a vote by mail ballot, on the ballot, there is a place for a certificate that you have to sign, and that's where your signature will go. And this is the form you do not want it says do not detach, you don't detach it. Everybody's got to fill this out. One of the things they do is they take that signature and they match it to the signature on file. When you register, you have a signature on file. Now, for people with disabilities, this can be a problem because your signatures might change. People who have degenerative illnesses that cause their handwriting to go back, to change significantly. I always encourage people to fill out when you fill out a registration, you can fill out a registration form to basically update your signature. And I encourage people to do that if their signature has changed significantly between elections, because that way there's no issue. However, in New Jersey now, starting with the July primary, if your signatures do not match, you will be sent another letter from the Board of Elections, the county clerk, I think it's the Board of Elections, saying, hey, your signatures didn't match. Here's a form to cure it. So you have to complete this form to basically cure the fact that your signatures don't match. You have to do a second step process. So be prepared. And this might be common for the people who register online and sign on a tablet, because I know when I sign on a tablet, it doesn't look anything like my regular signature that I sign with a pen. So just be prepared that you might get a letter from the Board of Elections a few days after you submit your vote by mail ballot. Do not throw that away. Look at it. If they ask you to fill out the form to cure your ballot, make sure you do that, because then you send it back in, and that way your vote will count. Because if you don't send it back in, they will not capture it. They will not count the ballot.
And that's starting in this election on November 3rd?
That started in, I think, the primary, but
Okay.
It's in effect for this election. The state had been sued about this because there's other states that allowed this curing process, and New Jersey did not. And a lot of vote by mail ballots were rejected because of signature mismatches. So they were sued, they came to a settlement, and the settlement was recently put into state legislation. So now it is in effect for this election that they will have this opportunity to cure. But you've got to be aware that you might be getting something from the Board of Elections days after you submit your ballot.
The takeaway message is, if you get a piece of mail from the Board of Elections or the county clerk referring to the election, don't throw it in the trash. Read it.
Okay. Yes.
Read it. Okay. I have one other question. I think this might be our last one, unless anybody else has anything in the chat. And this is a question actually from me, because I remember this from years past when we had our voter hotline and I would answer calls. One of the more common questions I would get is, I'm registered to vote. I'm almost sure, but I've moved at least twice since the time I registered to vote, and I don't know if I'm registered where I live now. What should I do? Right? This is the question I would get all the time. What should that kind of person do if you've moved since you registered to vote?
Well, that's why I tell people, check your registration. Go on to that Am I Registered, because that'll tell you where you're currently registered to vote. And if you have moved, but you have not moved beyond the county, you are now, say you lived in Trenton and now you live in Princeton, Mercer County, those are two towns in Mercer County, then you can still vote, but you have to update your registration. You can vote provisionally, and they'll say you're in the county, so you can vote, you just have to update your address. If you change counties and you do not re-register, then you would not be able to vote. So if you no longer live in the county that you lived in before, you are no longer registered in that county, you need to re-register. And that's why I tell everybody, I did this year. I go and just check. Am I registered? Am I registered in the right county? Has everything looked right? Have they done something crazy? No, I'm fine. And it's interesting because when I went to track my ballot, I signed up for Track Your Ballot, which is a great thing too. And it listed literally every election I voted in since I've registered to vote in the county that I currently live in. I had moved, so I changed registration in 2011. And so since 2011, it has my whole history of voting, which is kind of cool. And I saw that I did not vote in 2014 because my father had it's the only general election I did not vote in. And the reason I didn't vote in was my father had a heart attack 2 days before the election, and he was out in Ohio, and I had to go out to be with him because he was going into surgery. So that's another reason to, things happen that you can't plan for, and you might wind up missing voting. If voting is really important to you, that's the great thing about voting by mail, because you can vote and not have to worry about, is something going to happen on election day? So, and because I know I vote every year. I vote every year, and I did not vote that year because I couldn't. And it was too late to get a vote by mail ballot because it was literally 2 days before the election, and I had to take off and leave for another state. So I was not able to vote. And that's why I really try to make sure that that's why I like doing vote by mail, because then I don't have to worry about it. I got my vote by mail ballot yesterday. I will fill it out this weekend. I will drop it in a Dropbox, and I'm done. And whatever you do, if you're going to vote by mail, do it as soon as, don't wait on it. Once you get that ballot, fill it out and send it in, because at this point, you don't want to worry about mail being lost in the mail or whatever. Just make sure it's done.
If we've learned anything about 2020, it's that you have to expect the unexpected. And that means plan ahead. Get something done if you can get it done. If you're voting by mail, get it done. All right, I'm just checking the chat, looking over to the side here to see if we've got anything. I don't see any new questions in the chat. So Mary, I think that's all for us tonight. We wrapped up early.
Colleen, or does any of our partners want to say anything about voting?
Yeah, please, guys, if you want to chime in, I neglected, and I apologize to our DD partners and to the Ombudsman's office. We're joined up. These town hall meetings are a production of what we've kind of dubbed our DD partnership. It's Disability Rights New Jersey, it's the Boggs Center, it's the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities, and in addition to Mary and myself from Disability Rights New Jersey, we've got Mercedes Witowski from the Council on Developmental Disabilities. I believe we've got Colleen McLaughlin from the Boggs Center. We've got Paul Aronson and Christine Bachter from the Office of the Ombudsman for People with Developmental Disabilities and their family. I don't think I missed anybody in the window. But these guys are with us tonight. So if you guys have anything to add in, any kind of closing messages while we move away from voting, I have a few more housekeeping items to take care of before I sign off. But this is your chance if you want to speak up. I think you should all have control over your mute buttons if you want it.
No, just great job just encouraging everyone to vote and look at the resources if you need them. And thank you very much, Mary and Michael, for hosting this because it's important information.
Thanks, Colleen. All right. That's an important message. I think that we can leave it with that. Go out, register, go out and vote. Mary, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you're kind of working after hours to do some presentations and overtime with voting. It's going to be a busy season for you. I hope the hotline is fruitful. I know it's always a busy job to do. So thank you again for all your help and for helping present to this really important issue to an audience that's looking for the information. It's appreciated.
Thank you for having me. And as I say, if anybody has any questions, and I mean, I'm getting lots of questions, and that's fine because it's not the normal way people do things. And I know when you do something different for the first time, you're not really sure. So reach out to me, reach out to anybody that you want to know how to do it, because the key is to make sure you vote, and you want to make sure your vote counts.
One last time, what's that voter hotline number?
The voter hotline number is now you don't have the screen up. Let me just get it. 1-866-493-0023.
All right, there you go, everybody. One last time, there's the hotline number. Call Mary, ask her questions about voting. As far as housekeeping goes, I just have one more thing. I want to thank all of the participants, both from the partners, my colleagues, Disability Rights New Jersey, and all of the participants in the audience. Without you guys, this is meaningless. So it's important that you're here to get this information. Our session was recorded, and I'll be sharing that link to the recording to everyone who is registered, and we'll put that up on our website. Since this is a kind of a COVID-affected election, we're going to put it up on the drnj-covid.org. I'm going to put that in the chat right now just to make sure we don't forget. And if you go there, you'll be able to find a link to the recording and information to get to the voter hotline. Jill's very kindly put that hotline in the chat for you too. I also want to plug, we'll be having a few more town halls. We've had a little bit of a break. We had to catch our breath. And coming into the fall, though, we'll be having more town hall sessions. One to mark your calendar is October the 29th, where we'll be talking about some reopening, what's working, what's not working, and we'll have follow-on sessions in early November to talk about children's systems, special education in schools. I'm sure there'll be some hot topics, and by then, you know, like we said, you have to expect the unexpected. So our goal from those meetings is to hear from you, to understand what are the hot issues, what's most important, where are there problems. We also want to hear what's working great that we need to kind of magnify or replicate. So with that, I'll let everybody get back to their evenings. Really, again, thank you all for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.